Hey everyone, welcome to the Empathy by Design podcast. I'm Julie Johnson, and this is Empathy by Design by Integrate Trauma Informed Network, where we talk about how we build out containers, spaces, technology with this concept of trauma informed care at the core, where we start to look at not what's wrong with us as a system, but sorry, yeah, not what's wrong with us, but what's happened to us, and how do we build structures that more adequately meet the needs of all people. So today we have a lot of the main players of Integrate's Affinity Group, Sarah, Katie, and Famia, who we're all going to be talking just in as we kind of ramp up for our trauma informed leadership coffee, which may or may not you may or may not attend before you hear this. But we're going to be talking a little bit about the spirit of trauma informed leadership in light of 2025. And I think Katie and I talked about this a little bit. So this is more of like a continuation of Katie and I's discussion, which I think is warranted. And yeah, we're just going to kind of talk through things and see kind of like how are things shifting? Where are we when we think of thought leadership from a trauma informed lens? Where are we in that space? So, but first, let's introduce everybody because we have a lot of new listeners coming in this new iteration of Integrate. So let's just introduce everybody as we go through. So, Sarah, why don't you start since you're first on my screen?
What do you want me to share?
Just who you are, what you do in the world.
I am Sarah O'Brien. I am usually in Richmond, Virginia, but we are all visiting in our separate spaces, and eventually I'll be the lovely Famia in Detroit. So I'm in my hotel room. So those who usually see me on video see a much different background, but I'm not at home today. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been a practicing psychotherapist for 15 years or so. I have my own private practice, and I do a lot of mental health and trauma informed leadership content writing and speaking and things like this, and contribute writing and other things around mental health and trauma informed leadership for Integrate Network.
All right, Famia.
Hi, everyone. So I am based out of Detroit. So I am very fortunate to meet all of these lovely ladies. I've met both Julie and Sarah yesterday and Katie tomorrow. So really looking forward to that. Former educator here, right, turned community manager. So I currently sit on the intersection of health and wellness, technology, and education. And where I'm at currently, things are shifting for me. I am currently working alongside founders who need assistance and support in creating more efficient workflows with their businesses. So with Julie, I get to help co-facilitate the relationships between the members and create these amazing spaces where, the members get to come in and really drive the relationships together. So very fortunate to work alongside the leaders and get to see all this stuff unfold. So that's where I sit currently.
Katie, go for it.
Hi, everyone. Katie Kurtz. I'm based in Cleveland, Ohio, and my background is in social work. I've been in the social work field for over 15 years, but my career has taken me all over the place, as one does. But I am a subject matter expert in trauma-informed care and specifically specialize in making it integrative into everyday practice, whether that's self-leadership, leadership, or culture making. And so I lead training and consulting and part of Integrate. And I'm gonna sneeze here.
All good.
All good.
Yeah. And I just want to say up ahead of time, I am recording this in a coffee shop. So if anyone listens to this is my new recording studio sometimes. And anyway, so you do when you remote work is sometimes you just pop up at a podcast at a Starbucks with high good internet. So, whatever. Here we are.
Love the authenticity of it, Julie.
Right. I love it that she's just like having this whole conversation Starbucks. Right?
Hey, learning session for those in the back.
Oh, no. I've spent enough time in remote work now that like it's more common. Like Laura and I were at my local Starbucks. Yeah. There's a girl next to me right now that's on a meeting as well. So like, yeah. So it's becoming more common. I was like, oh, it's more of a common thing because we're not set up for remote work. And for some reason, people don't realize that people do remote work. And sometimes they don't want to live in their houses with their, their kids who are also talking to you while you're doing meetings. So
shout out to public libraries. That's my new my new space.
Public libraries are good. And I was gonna say, for for Julie getting interrupted right before we started. Her kid called and asked her to cook her a potato, but she's not at home. She's at the coffee shop.
Oh my gosh.
He was at
Okay.
home. The Buddha just walked in and was like, can
And
you
then
have a potato?
and then she went into and then she was like, and then can you just come pick me up because like the internet's slow.
Sorry.
No, we have work to do
My
first.
my daughter is very 14, just so you know. Anyway, in all the ways. All right. So okay. So we're gonna talk a little bit more. We're gonna go to our first question. So our first question today, as we kind of talk through what trauma-informed leadership looks like from this, I don't know, 2025 existential crisis we are in at the moment as a collection, as a collective, worldwide, not just the United States. This is not, we're going to talk about the United States because we're in the United States, but we are not, the energy is just not pertinent to the United States. It's actually pertinent to also New Zealand. I was getting updated on some of the stuff that's happening in New Zealand as well. Also, there's like a right-wing, I don't know, resurgence after in New Zealand as well, after their prime minister who helped kind of save lives during COVID. They've had kind of a resurgence of sort of this anti science movement. So it was interesting. It's not just us, is what I'm saying. It's worldwide. So so as you go as Katie or Premier, Sarah, how as solopreneurs and small business owners, you all integrate trauma-informed practices into what you do in the world. And how are you seeing, like in 2025, this concept of resilience and mental well-being shift? Or maybe it hasn't shifted, but how have you noticed it in yourself or others or both?
Yeah, I can start. So I think the big thing about what's happening right now is it's happening everywhere. It's not just here in New Zealand. I mean, it's in every country, right? And a lot of this isn't new, which is good because there's a lot of people we can listen and learn from who've been in this position before. But it is newer to many of us, and the magnitude and the fact that we open our phone and we can be in a war zone or in a community or in someone's personal life, right? And so for me personally, I'm going into my 9th year of being a trauma-informed business, and I notice my personal capacity and sturdiness in my values, which align with the trauma-informed principles that I lead and teach, are very strong. I feel really strong in that. I feel very convicted in leading those values out loud, which is good, right? So that means when things come our way, which it will, I don't feel like I'm wavering. I have a compass to lead from. And all the work, we always say like doing the work, right? Quote unquote, has helped me and continues to help me as I evolve, because there's no arrival, to just really understand the interconnectedness of everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening here in the US is interconnected to what is happening in Gaza, which is happening in New Zealand. Everything, like what's happening in every corner of the world, every issue in the United States, it's all interconnected. And so that is when you can open your mind and your heart and your eyes to that, I think it helps gain some clarity and purpose. For me too, it's also about getting into relationship with myself deeper, my capacity. Remembering resilience is our nervous system capacity, and we can't be using resilience while building it, right? Because we're actively using our resilience, we're not able to build it at the same time. So if we are thinking about resilience, we need to be thinking about nervous system capacity and how we're nurturing our nervous system right now and heightening our practices of co-regulation with people, trusted people, in trusted spaces, with nature, with art, with music, animals, all these things that help us co-regulate and nurture that capacity. But there's so many elements, and I think the biggest thing for me is I feel I mean, how can we not do this approach? Like it's like we're just like waving my flag, like, hey y'all, like we have this approach for a reason, and now is the time we have to be using it. And I will not say now more than ever because I feel like I can't say it anymore. But it's true. And I think, especially as we think about, we know and evidence has shown us that the trauma-informed approach changes the epigenetics of ourselves and our collective, which can create generational recovery and healing. And that's what we're going to need right now. So I really, my little rebel fiery heart gets all excited, but I gotta also like let her sleep a little bit, and rest because she'll be up all night planning. So.
Yeah. I like that you said that, Katie, because for me, like I've noticed like my nervous system has been out of whack, and I'm going to be very real, right? Because we're human and stuff. And I was just like, I had to just take a few deep breaths and just kind of bring myself down a couple notches. And I said, okay, I can't tell people how to be, and I can offer these trauma-informed principles, but I also have to be very self-aware. Because when you said within, I can't model and teach something if I myself am not embodying these practices, these values, and these principles, because then there's that big disconnect, right? I can't, and right, I'm an educator, so it has to make sense for me. So I'm like, okay, I can't teach this if I myself am not presenting and modeling this too. So for me, it starts with self-awareness of understanding, okay, how I'm feeling, how can I apply these principles, and then modeling and teaching it. So I see myself doing them. Do I forget? Yes, I'm human. Okay. We're not always perfect, but I am noticing, like with the leaders that I do work with, I just got off a call with one. What I appreciate about him, he doesn't realize he's applying these trauma-informed principles because he doesn't label it or name it as that. But he'll check in with me. He'll tell me, like, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think? Does it make sense to you? So he's applying these principles without fully naming it as trauma informed. So I feel like the more we, right, model these, the more it starts to become more of a natural practice, an applied practice for those leaders. So that's at least what I'm noticing is the implementation of like the psychological safety. Instead of people trying to fix me, they're acknowledging the fact that I've just had a crappy day, or how do you feel? What do you think? So I'm noticing the intentional piece coming through. Now, is that for everyone? No, but I do see some progress to us moving towards that path. So that's why I appreciated when you said the within, because it does start with us first. We have to embody and live out those values first before we come out and start trying to teach and guide everybody else to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what leadership has to start with self, right? Like we can't lead anything or anyone if we can't begin within.
Yeah.
Anything else before we move to the next question? Okay. So when it comes to trauma-informed leadership and shaping company culture and employee retention strategies, what do you think? Pick whatever works for you, startups, solopreneurship. Whenever you're in a high, how do you think it shapes navigating growth, scaling, personal growth, collective growth? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit. I write about this a lot in psychological safety and workplace health. And I write about this a lot because workplace health for mental health providers, therapists, social workers is abysmal. And considering we are part of, the healing profession and being there for others, the fact that it is abysmal for the people providing the care is just beyond infuriating for me. So that's like the first industry that obviously is close to home since it's mine and I've had those experiences. And so, what Katie's saying, what Famia is saying is true. It has to start with self, right? And if you're a leader, then it starts with you, and then you have to model these things. They have to be important to you. One of the things that I talked about in our trauma-informed leadership symposium is authenticity and the connection between your mission statement and your organizational culture. If they don't match, well, then you're not doing it. There's no other way to say it. Like, you know, you can't say that you're about safety, trust, authenticity, use whatever words you want to all around the trauma-informed care and leadership principles. But if you are saying that and not modeling it, not doing it in real time with real people, as I like to say, then it doesn't matter what it says. So, I mean, action has to be taken and change has to come. And we all know that like, change is hard coming, right? Like, especially with people in leadership. And, you know, I always like to say that, and one of the most interesting parts of the job for me and being a psychotherapist and working in the one-to-one space with, at this point, thousands of people in my career, is learning all about what they do for work and how they got into it, and what their work is like, how they do their work, you know, and who else is there and how many people they work with and all that kind of stuff. And it's also true that people talk about relationships and work the most in therapy. That is 100% it. And I think people talk about work a lot in therapy because there's relationships at work as well, right? Like whether you have a formal one, a friendly one, a cordial one, or a not good one, they exist. And at work, we can't get around them, right? Like, I mean, you can essentially estrange from family in friendships and relationships, but unless you change jobs, like you are just there dealing with the relationships and the people at work. And so this idea of like safety, trust, choice, like what Famia is saying, like just being asked the question of like, well, what do you think? How does this land for you? How do you interpret it? Is choice, you know, it's sharing an opinion, it's sharing what works for her. And if we're not doing that, number one, people don't feel comfortable to share, so they're not gonna, so we're maybe not gonna get to change. And I think that's what happens a lot, is that people are afraid to speak up. And so when they do surveys or polls or studies, they're like, oh, it's fine at our organization. It's like, nobody's being honest at your organization. Like, we have to find a different way to actually capture this, because people are afraid to be honest because of retaliation. And that happens all the time. And so what I am hearing, even like from my clients at their workplaces, right, and what I see sort of that needs to come up is this idea that whoever is, you know, doing the job, like whether you're the middle manager or the CEO or the nurse practitioner in the ER or the financial analyst at the bank or whomever, that all of these people have to be important and not just the role, the job, the position, and the work they do. And it is just not like that out there. You guys know that. And so what I do for my solopreneurship, right, is function in my private practice that way, write about these things, and then do my very best to empower my clients, to ask for the things that they need, to advocate for what they need, to have their own voice and choice, to have the words to say, to be able to do it effectively. I do a lot of like coaching, counseling, training, guiding, teaching in this area. And for some of them, it makes a huge difference, like individually or interpersonally, to do that. But the whole reason that I'm also in this space with you all and trying to do something beyond the one-to-one is like, they're also only making the change one person at a time, right? I'm empowering them to advocate for themselves, but that's not changing their team, their organization, their management, right? Like, and all of that. And so what we're talking about here is like, there needs to be more of a collective. Individuals can make this choice. I think maybe more individuals are making this choice, maybe in self-leadership, maybe in some of the trauma-informed principles, but it's applying it to the collective or collaborative is like where I think it gets sticky for people, and they don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Oh no, I am just kidding. Sometimes I've been like putting myself on mute. I'm not. But it's interesting hearing you say that, Sarah, because I'm finishing up my digital health certification right now, and we just launched an app about 4 months ago, which feels like 12 years ago.
Yeah, it does.
But which says a lot about how it feels to do digital health right now. That's like how it feels. But it reminds me, just because I'm in that headspace a lot, is when you're doing from a digital health, you're trying to do more of that scaling of care, right? And the backside of, I don't think this is a surprise to any of you all. I realized it here, I'm preaching to the choir, but maybe not people listening, is that the way that our technology is created is usually by people, no offense to UX people, love UX people, love working with them, love you all, and not critiquing you. But lots of times what happens with mental health tech, what I've experienced when I've worked on teams, is that the UX of it increases because we're trying to make stakeholders happy and we're increasing the speed of things. And then we abandon the product too quickly because we don't meet these markers before people's nervous systems even implement it. And so essentially in terms of like what I was saying, like what's happening right now is we have, since for the last 5 years, we've had like a mental health crisis or what, since COVID. And now we're just in a collective mental health crisis. It just got worse. But like we just kept digging the hole.
Again. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And our technology has also gotten more developed. So like it's like we have more technology and our problem got bigger and our technology got bigger. But our way that we work through the implementation of those systems is still just as quick and just as fast and just as innovative without checking for, is it actually purposeful and helpful?
Right.
And it's really hard. It's been very challenging. They have no data because they move so quickly. There's almost no data. I was reading an article on this morning. They have almost no data on how effective digital health is because apps, mental health, anything, because of how quick UX moves and how slow the nervous system moves. I have all things to say about this, but they have no data. There's no research worldwide. Like there's qualitative, but there's nothing like it's quantitative right now from the National Institute of Health and definitely not United States right now. So
interesting.
So there's no hard hitting facts, no data.
Yeah, it's interesting that nobody's wanted to do that to then like boost their own product. So
That doesn't surprise me at all. Doesn't surprise me at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, the
And
National
that's-
Institute. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, and that the reason why,
Yeah,
and then
why?
the reason why we're going to see these mental health tech startups and apps fizzle, it is because we aren't taking a trauma-informed approach to it. And we're not doing it in a way that is bi-directional. So kind of to what Sarah was sharing, trauma-informed anything is countercultural, right?
Mhm.
So it is asking us, to your point, Julie, to be more aware of our pace and understand that we build trust in the pace of our nervous system and that we aren't actually in necessarily a mental health crisis. We're in a nervous system prolonged
Dysregulation.
stress,
Yeah.
collective trauma that is giving rise to a mental health crisis. And we have to stop siloing mental health over here or trauma for, like, it's all interconnected, y'all.
Yep.
But we in order to adopt trauma-informed approaches to create trauma-informed cultures, we have to shift it. And I love the term and concept from Kelly Deals around culture making. Workplace culture, like, culture is made of people. It's not just like this thing that happens, right? Like, we, the people, make the culture. And so we, the people, can shift it. But we have to look at levels of readiness. And I don't think that startup culture was at a level of readiness to truly meet the demands of slowing things down, to look at the nervous system of the tech world to align it with the service it's providing. And we need to look, what I see all the time is that, yeah, we do have some levels of readiness from decision makers and C-suite leaders and startups and whatever, but we need to shift from like resistance to readiness. And when those organizations are ready to really shift culture, it's amazing and it's you feel it. However, most people aren't, because they don't have the shared language and understanding, which is essential to culture making and culture shifting, which trauma-informed leadership gives us. And we need those people at the other end. If we're not ready for a top-down approach, we need a bottom-up. So we need this bi-directional to create a groundswell of individuals adopting this approach to your point, Vamia, raising and expanding self-awareness, and to model and mirror this so that we can build a groundswell that meets that top to shift the culture. Because if each person begins to model and create shared language, raise awareness, then the culture will shift. But it takes time, and I think, that pace is something that it doesn't always mix
Value.
well
Yeah.
with the fast-paced tech
Mhm.
world. And that's why I'm just not surprised. I mean, it's the same, that's reflective in any other thing, right? We see that in government, nonprofits, right? Like, let's make a change, a huge overhaul change, but you're going to give you 1 year of funding.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting because we're not on those grant systems, because I can speak from Integrate's my first 4 months of working this way with Integrate. And I know our users really well. Like, I mean, I know I've been with them for a hot minute, but like taking people that you've known in one instance and putting them into a new instance, it's a whole new different thing I'm learning with, people. And
Isn't that interesting?
And yeah, I could do a whole podcast on this by
You
myself.
could.
I'm not.
Just modality is something for the nervous system to contend with people, like going from, an app on a computer or on your phone, like a website to an app, and just that modality transition is like something for the nervous system to
it's so we did a usability. We're in the middle of a usability test right now. I've done several actually, but with different people from some people from the tech world, some people from that are just like trauma survivors that have been my yoga students for a while. And it's been really interesting with the feedback. Everybody loves what we're doing. There's no lack of support, for that. I think I go, this is more of a usability observation, not anything anybody has said, by the way. So I'm not saying anything any person has told me, by the way. So this is just Julie's synthesized look so my synthesized perspective in the first 4 months of our app, when we look at what we're changing, why we do what we do, and all that good stuff, is from a usability standpoint for trauma survivors, we're really struggling with remembering what's there for care. That's the best way I can say is remembering what is there to help you, and remembering what's there for care. Specifically, one person sent me a text message was in her thing. She did say I could share this. She said, I need to remember to look at the app and not social media.
Yes.
Which was, I think was a really valid statement. And that's why I said, remembering what's there for care, because she was like, I need to remember that your app is there to care for me. And I don't need to go scroll. I have to catch myself doom scrolling and then move to your app in order to catch myself. I thought that was a really insightful perspective. And I have to do that myself too. I'm like, is it better for
my
me to
clients too? They say that
because you get sucked in.
Yeah. And I've directed a bunch of my clients to our app because don't know what to do. And I'm like, just go here, just read something here. If you just, you can't get out of the habit of scrolling. It's just scroll on this instead of on this. It's just go to, it's some of them are starting to make that trend, or they catch themselves oh, it's been 30 minutes on TikTok. Let me go do something else or whatever,
It makes a lot of sense, because when you open up a social media app, it's unpredictable. You don't know what the first thing you're going to see or
Katie,
what you're going to hear.
That exciting dopamine hit thing.
But also that creates that hits our nervous system. And if we're already in a state of stress, then it's going to feed into it. And that's why we end up dissociating or doom scrolling out of anxiety or screaming at people in comments. It makes sense, right? But when you open the Integrate app, it's predictable, it's consistent, it's transparent. So you're opening it and you know what to expect, right? There's a vibe. There's people that look familiar, people that you're building trust with. There's accessibility, there's inclusion, there's all these things that nurture the nervous system that you can't get from social media. So that
there's
makes,
not always
again,
new
a lot of
stuff.
sense.
That's the idea. There's not always new stuff. Like you're not going to open it tomorrow and something new is going to pop up there. Like new content gets added. We add resources and things, but it's not like, you know, Katie, what you're describing here, where it's this like something new and flashy, like 50,000 times a day that you open the app, you know, and it's like, that's true. Every time you open either one of them, the very first thing you see is something different.
Yeah,
And it's
but that's what
interesting.
most, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry,
Oh,
Julie.
no, go ahead, Sammy. You're good. I'll go to my part. You keep going.
Yeah, I mean, from my like personal experience and what I've witnessed is integrate, like, Katie was saying, provides that consistency. It's predictable. You know what to expect. It's transparent. But a lot of startups are not that, right? They always come out with the phrase that just drives me crazy: hit the ground running. I don't want to hit the ground running, right? I want to ease in so that I understand what's expected of me, so that I know what
too
to
soon, too
do.
fast.
Yeah, so that I can provide quality work and not just half-ass it. I hope I can say that here, right? But I'm just being honest, right? Because that's what I've experienced with just about every startup that I've been in. They're so high stress, they're fast moving, they're unpredictable, like what Katie said. They expect you to know everything from the second you walk in. And let's be honest, not everybody knows everything, right? We all come in from a learning perspective, right? And so for me, that has actually re-triggered some past trauma from my teaching experience because of the perfectionist and having to know everything. And I'm like, listen, I am a learner. I don't know everything. And I will proudly say that. I said, but to say to hit the ground running, no, I don't want to hit the ground running. I want to ease in, please, with clarity and consistency.
I want to walk.
And that's where we keep getting stuck.
Yes.
Is because we hit the ground running. That's an immediate stressor.
Yeah.
And then your pace is so fast, you're hitting a sprint
and
when
you can't keep up a sprint.
You can't sprint a marathon.
That's right.
And so like that is where we see the issue, is that the counterculture is we're not telling people to stop and slow roll it through. We're just saying, instead of hit the ground running, can you pause, look around, look and see what the map is ahead, and maybe start with a warm-up walk.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
We don't need a sprint. I'm just staying with these metaphors, but like that's where if you want different results, meaning you want retention because you don't want to burn your people out and you want productivity and innovation, that culture of stress, even if it's dressed up as
exciting
something else, adrenaline is adrenaline, and it's going to burn people out. And so using a trauma-informed approach gives you a pace that actually helps regulate the environment, which allows and gives rise to creativity, innovation, morale, productivity. Like it's not complicated, it's a choice.
Yeah, let me say one thing, Julie, before you go on to the next part about that. As we're talking about startups and whatnot, though, and everybody probably knows this is true. I don't think I'm saying something that three of y'all don't know for sure. I don't know about our audience, but I don't know how often I'm gonna throw out a large number of like 90+% probably of startups are funded by venture capitalists. And you hit the ground running because those people want a return on their literal dollar investment. So they want you to roll out what you can get, whatever you're supposed to get, whatever thing that then your startup is then supposed to generate income for, to then please your investors basically in your thing. And that's why we can't do a walking pace. They want that return on their investment literally in dollars, literally as quick as possible. And that's just not how it works. And I think in like a lot of conversations with Julie, like off screen or whatever, when we're in meetings or doing other things, it's this idea that like people can't do that in 2025. Like it doesn't matter what happened before, like people can't spend like that in 2025. People don't have capacity for that in 2025. And so I think there's a lack of this like transparent conversation with startup owners or startup innovators and ideas with their investors to say, hey, the return on this, we predict it's going to be this if we feed into it this way, right? Like the slow and steady wins the race kind of thing. and set that up transparently with their investors and say, if you're expecting a quick return on this, then don't invest in this startup, but nobody does that because they want the money and then they want this and then we're off running. And then, you guys know how capitalism rules in the United States of America. Money rules literally morals, laws, and everything else. It's all about often making a dollar unless you get the people that are care about the people and whatever thing they're doing, right? And so there's this piece here that we're talking about, right? That there needs to be this transparency between everybody in the startup before we even like putting the thing out there for customer or user, experience. And we know that doesn't happen often.
Yeah. And can I just say something really quickly? Because I just thought of something that I was actually told. I think the bigger issue too is that there's no system set in place that work for the collective, right? It's like this one system that is expected to work for that one person. And I was told that maybe startup is not for me, right? Because I need something more organized. And I had to pause. And I said, I've worked in startups before that actually have worked for me. I said, there's just not a system. I said, may I share my honest advice from being here is there has been no system for us to work together to create that works collaboratively for all of us. It's been just for that one person, but not for all. It's not a one size fits all system. And creating like these fear-based management style systems, it does not work. It does not work. And again, was asked, why is there no trust and no safety built? And I said, well, you can't expect people to just trust you. You have to earn that, but you need a solid system that involves the transparency, the clarity, the consistency. If you don't have that, you're not going to have a solid system set in place. It's going to eventually fall apart. So,
well,
yeah.
Some of the problem of that, and when we start talking about assistive technology, or it's definitely an issue in assistive technology, but and any sort of technological system meant to help break a barrier is. And no offense to engineers that are doing good things or developers saying this. So I just want to preface that because sometimes they say things and I get an email later. So like, just an FYI, I'm not speaking to anybody personally, but I'm just speaking to sometimes this is why we do usability tests, why we go through a UX process. Okay. So lots of times what happens when we don't do that is when somebody who's looking at something like an engineer or a developer, this is what I usually see is when I'm working with somebody who doesn't have hands-on experience with, for lack of a better word, the problem, that's what I've got, that they're trying to solve. Okay. I'm using those words just for consistency purposes, not because it's a problem. Okay. But that's how they see it. Okay. Not that mental health is a problem, not that accessibility is a problem. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. But when someone outside of that worldview or that's a lived experience is coming in to solve a problem with technology, they overcomplicate the solution. And they end up moving into what happens a lot of times with apps and with tech, mental health tech, any sort of tech meant to be revolutionary, whatever. AI for sure does this. Yes and no, depending on what they're doing, but it over-engineers it. And I saw this really interesting cartoon recently about over-engineering in UX magazine. I was talking about this problem about how this engineer wrote up this like plan for this like thing that's gonna like drive and it's gonna like move fast and it's gonna like help us like get from A to B. And it was a rocket ship. And then the usability person drew a bike. So it like they were defining the same problem, trying to solve the same problem with very different solutions. And the bike ended up winning because it was just to go from point A to point B.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Both can go from point A to point B depending on your distance.
Yeah.
That's such a great example. Yeah.
Right. And so my point in saying that is sometimes is the reason why we need to do thorough usability. You never stop testing. You never stop. It's always continuous. You're always testing. You test, in different ways, different times, different places. You never stop testing or doing user research. You're kind of always doing it when you are developing it.
Yeah.
Because you can, and I've had to stop myself in the process too of moving back and over engineering. Like, okay, we're over engineering for this stage. We need to backtrack to whatever, because we don't have any data that that's actually necessary, especially where we are right now. We have no data to support that that's necessary.
I think that what the reminder here too is that, again, bidirectionality. So if we're doing usability tests with the product or the
Right, that's
service or the
bidirectional.
offering, yes,
Yeah,
but
that's
what
bidirectional.
usability tests are you doing with the people that are creating those products? Like,
There you
we
go.
need to be
Right.
doing whatever the
Mhm.
equivalent of like a usability test with the workforce and
Yes.
the culture, because if you have lack of trust or any of these things, again, you're going to, or a stressful work environment where collaboration isn't nurtured, etc., you're going to have a myriad of results that impact engagement, experience, outcomes, productivity, innovation. And so, again, it goes both ways.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think, like, to speak to that, Katie, the developers don't see the value in that either, and that's kind of the issue, right? Like, Julie does, but that's because we're using trauma informed stuff, right? And then also we, because of trauma informed, we apply to self, so it's bi-directional that way too. So out and then in, like, so not just out and then bi-directional, like how are other people receiving it? But I'm hearing you bi-directional as in output and input for ourselves. Like, are we also looking at that rather than just outputting it? And I think,
There's your case study.
boom, because I'm gonna say right now, right, the bigger issue with that, and you guys are all entrepreneurs, you know this, it takes a certain kind of fortitude, some skill, different kind of resilience to be an entrepreneur, period. To develop anything, to start up anything, to start a product, to start a company. You already, like, you have some strength, you have some grit. So I'm just gonna say, yeah. So you probably have like confidence bordering on arrogance if you haven't done your self-reflection and your self-work and your self-awareness. And so, and I don't think it's like maliciously intended. So let me be clear about that. I think it's often just an oversight, like a little bit like what Julie's talking about. Like, I don't think people are like intentionally doing this, but I think it's part of the subconscious of like innovation, especially in leadership, because that's kind of how they get there, right? Like that they're essentially, right, like seeing beyond like the day-to-day, whatever that is, and sort of has some strategy going on. But if you're innovating something, maybe particularly tech, you could have this high confidence, I'll say, that your product and your thing and everything you're doing with it is just like the bee's knees, right? Like it's just the best shit out there, and not taking the time to test for usability and with yourself, because sometimes that feedback is not what you want. It's going to halt innovation. It's going to change. It's going to move from your original idea. The investor's not going to like it, right? Like all of those things. And so it's just like, this is great. My idea is great. This thing is great. Go. And it's like, but maybe it's not great. And like, you can't see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's why, yeah, that's why you have user tests. That's why you always are. I mean, any good company is constantly. That's why you have a user testing, department, or you. It's
Right.
if we're speaking to small businesses. So yeah, no, absolutely, it's definitely yeah. And the thing I was also thinking of before we move on, as you were talking, is we have to be responsible. This is definitely empathy by design. We have to be responsible for the containers we create, and I think mostly because I work in either the wellness or the tech spaces, is there's a lack of responsibility for the spaces that we create. And Katie can speak to this. And so on the technological scale, I've seen tech company or UX companies just abandon mental health products with active users in there. And they're just like, well, we're going on to the next project. Bye. Nice knowing you for the last year and a half. We built up a whole resource for you, and now we're just going. See you later.
Right.
And that is very common. It's like, and like, there's absolutely no accountability, no responsibility, no like, whoops, it was like, we're just moving on to the next thing, because that's what we do. We innovate, we start up, we just go on to the next, whatever VC thing. Same with Wellness World. It's like, we'll see, coaches just start masterminds. Katie, I know you can speak to this with a lot, we'll start masterminds and something bad will happen and they'll move on to the next thing when something bad happens and one of their, whatever, this has definitely happened to us, me locally, but like they'll do this big thing, something bad will happen. They're like, oh, we have a new thing. Okay. A new brand, a new masterclass. Don't worry about that. But like, so there's no accountability for these spaces that we contain to do this sort of self-leadership work.
Yeah. And then Julie, because I'm listening to you say that, is when that happens, because I've heard it from users, and by users I mean like clients, members, the consumers that are coming in using the product, they feel dismissed. I've heard it from a number of people. They say that their needs, they felt they've been dismissed because there was no transparency, there was no like heads up. They were kind of like surprised, whoa, when did that happen? And I know sometimes it's not intentional, right? When we move from one product idea to the next, but to them, from their lens, from their perspective, as they feel dismissed, they're like, hey, we were just doing this, what about us? So then there's that accountability piece and the responsibility of somebody having to nurture them, letting them know, give them a heads up. And then what happens again, and I've seen happen, is that those members, when they continually feel that way, they end up leaving. And they have told me, why am I still here if you are not, kind of paying attention to what it is that I need and what we're here for? So, there's that intentional piece too. It's not done on purpose, but sometimes it is, because it's expected of members to know and just to follow along. And it doesn't work like that. You lose members.
And that comes back
yeah.
to kind of where we started this conversation is if you hold a purpose, a vision, and values, those aren't nice words you slap on a website about page. If you really value certain things, those values should be demonstrated through actions, and they should be felt by your customer. And so if your strength, if have the self-awareness and you're an innovator, you're somebody that can create, you're a visionary, you have that is the type of leader who you are, that's amazing. Then you need to make sure you're adding people to your team that can help manage the community you're building and the users, and to ensure that you're not rupturing trust. Because when we rupture trust, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, that is harm.
Yeah.
And most people don't want to cause harm, but that's what happens.
That's right.
And it not just ruptures harm with the humans, but the brand and their potentiality to utilize any type of mental health tech in the future or wellness program in the future.
Right.
So you're creating a ripple effect of harm. Right. And harm is I know a big and charged word, but harm is what happens is like when there's nothing productive that comes after that, right? Conflict, there can be positive outcomes or constructive outcomes. Discomfort, same. Hurt, also. Harm, it's just when something happens and there's nothing constructive that comes from that. And therefore, unless there's restorative practice and repair, but by that time, you're on to the next 30 apps. So when we say slowing down and pacing ourselves, it means pausing and asking those questions of what will be the impact if we move on, and who will be impacted and how will they be impacted, and what are we going to do to create a bridge that does not, harm the people and customers we've had.
Yeah,
I like what you said there with impact. I was just I've been talking about this a lot with clients. And for those of you who don't know, I work with adults, mostly with trauma and anxiety and substance use disorders. And so I'm hearing well, just in my work often, and I think maybe people in general have this issue, right? We want to be in this black white thinking camp, this either or, this good or bad, this judgment place. Like it's either this or it's that, or like we can even say it's like it's growth and innovation, or it's, maintenance or whatever. And it's like they can't coexist. It's like it has to be this one or the other. And having these conversations individually with my clients in psychotherapy sessions, I hear it so much even within themselves, right? Or like the judgment that comes with an outcome or with a decision or with a thought or with a motivation, right? That there's a judgment with it, even for themselves. They're judging themselves, or judging what they think, or judging this thing that they think is good and this thing that they think is bad, you know, or this view or this belief or this value, whatever, this action. And I'm really, you know, for a long time, but it's helpful to have like even some new language around it now, help moving them away from the black white thinking, really to move them away from judgment to just consider impact, right? And this is a word that I use often with them. And it's like, well, okay, so you think that, but is it good or bad? Or like, what is the impact of your thought of that? What is the impact on you if you go down that line of thinking, right? What is the impact on the people around you if you go down that line on thinking? What is the impact if you take that action? What's the impact if you take this other action? What's the impact on you? What's the impact on the people and the things around you, right? And this is just a question in general that I think people are not asking themselves very often, if at all. And it's different. I mean, it's a little bit like, let's take a look at the outcome, but it's not just like what happened. It's like, how did it land on people? What happened? Right. And this goes back to the people thing that we're all about here in Trauma Informed, because you can't leave that piece out. It's not only like, how great is it? You know, like, how many new people did it turn over? How many numbers do we have? How many users do we have? How many subscribers do we have? It's like, what's the impact for those people that subscribed or that use, right? Like, or what's the impact out in the world then, or on business? And maybe this is like a usability piece and the testing piece that we're not doing enough of. But I think just asking this question way more often, no matter what industry you're in, would move us a little bit more towards this middle space, because it's moving us out of whatever the outcome is being good or bad in a judgment. It's like, just what is it first? What is the impact? And then we can go from there.
Yeah.
Sarah, one thing I want to explain, and then we have to get off, but before we tie things up, but coming from like an interpersonal space, a collective space, because I think this is going to sort of tie some stuff up. You know, one of the things that I say to people often, because I also work in the mind and body field, is when you go down some sort of spiritual path, let's say, be prepared that that will impact the relationships around you, whether that's trauma therapy, whether that's some, I don't know, shadow work. Maybe I've been impacted by that, but like, I have, by the way, I have opinions about it, but like, I'm not shy on that, but like, or something else, whatever, you go on a retreat, you go to a transformational, it will impact your relationships. It's not just you going on this isolated journey. And and I think it's really important. And that goes for tech, that goes for anything quote unquote transformational, is that
that's the interconnectedness that Katie's talking about.
Yeah. Is that this isn't just about the UX designers and the developers moving on to the next thing. It's not just about me going to, I don't go to these things, but if I did, it's not just going to be about me going to my next retreat. Well, it's going to impact my kids. It's going to impact Luke getting care and like whatever, my kids getting their needs met. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's a very basic level of it. But my point is we all have to own the responsibility and the choices we make when we start to deal with the vulnerable spaces inside of ourselves and with each other.
It's all
Absolutely.
Interconnected.
Yeah.
Right. And I think people don't think about that. And like a lot of times that shows up in the one-to-one psychotherapy space, because they're there to work on this stuff for themselves. But like I just said in the beginning, the thing that people talk about the most are relationships and work. And usually the thing at work is relationships at work rather than the work itself. Occasionally that's stressful for people, but not nearly as much as the people at work. Right. And so even, I love that you're saying that, Julie, because even though you're going on this transformational change, right? Like in your psychotherapy or whatever, it has an impact on the people around you. And sometimes we got to put that in the purview. Like it's not like people are very concerned just in general about how does this impact me? What does this mean for me? How does this change or whatever affect my thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, and opinions? But not thinking how are we bringing that back out into the world, which is that it's just such a huge piece. I think people just miss it. They just don't think about it.
Well, and I'm going to say this because we have a lot of people in the yoga world. So I just kind of want to make this pertinent to them before I leave I just am restating this. How many of you, speaking not you, but like listening, okay, have like, okay, I'm going to go on a retreat. I'm going to go lead a retreat. how many steps did it take for you that are moms or have to work for caregiver? How many steps did it take for you to make that happen? Right. Okay. What did you have to do to make that happen? And I just want to, because that's a kind of a little bit of shadow work is real and it's evident if you can do it safely. That's my byproduct before I say that. But it's the shadow side of these things we see on Instagram, these big retreats. I'm like, that costs something, someone, somewhere. Okay. That's supporting you or your life or whatever. Your partner, someone, your kids. And that's fine. But whether you're making a decision for a container for people's healing technologically or interpersonally, and there's a cost to it all.
Yeah.
And what's the cost?
Mhm.
That's my final note.
Yeah.
I do want to say something before we do go. I hear this a lot that if I include everybody at the table, everything is great, everything is fine. But the question I've asked them is, how do people feel when they're actually sitting at the table? Just because you include me to sit on that table doesn't mean that I actually feel like I belong there, right?
That's such a good
So
point.
when yeah, because I hear it from a number of people, I'm like, you invited me, but that doesn't mean like I actually feel like I belong here. Like, what have you actually done to make everybody feel welcome? So we talk about trauma informed. It's really honoring, right, people's differences and making sure that humanity is centered right then and there at that table. So that's just
and we're
something I
back.
just wanted to say. Yeah.
That's the difference between a what and the how, right? And that I talk about with trauma informed. So the what is including everybody at the table. The how is what are we doing with everybody there so that they feel included, accepted as themselves and as though they belong. That's the how part.
That's the leadership part, is what are the strategies and skills? How are you harnessing communications, relationship building, critical thinking, collaboration to build that trust, which can lead to safety and belonging? Having people at a table is just the intention. You need action to yield the impact. That's your algorithm.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, any final thoughts before we get off? Anybody? All right, cool. Well, thank you, everybody. You can always attend whatever. If you can't make, obviously we're in Detroit this weekend, but if you want to attend any in person, we are in St. Louis in person monthly-ish, depending on wherever there's the latest disaster. Our last coffee shop got hit by the tornado, so just go find us on Meetup. I know it's been really disruptive.
Jeez.
It's been a very disruptive chapter. Yeah. I mean, just in general, I'm like, well, we can't go there anymore. Okay, I gotta go find somewhere else that meets all of our needs, And so I don't know where we're meeting yet at the end of June. Supposedly it's Northwest Coffee House, but supposedly there was some damage. To be continued. Anyway, we'll find us online. We have virtual one, at least the 2nd and 4th. We have a second, I think it's the 2nd of Saturday of the month. And we'll be in Richmond, I think, eventually in the fall. So it'll be cool. Good times. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for listening as usual. All right. We'll stop recording. Oh, does anyone want to do a picture really quickly after we get off here? We're done. Okay.